Brett McMurphy shook the world yesterday. The Action Network.
This is a code 10 abort.
It's just going to be that kind of day, like the big voice, kind of, I don't know. Brett McMurphy with the Action Network went on 365 Sports yesterday and shook the universe when he said, and it's an interesting quote, you can see it right there, that Washington and Oregon had been vetted and cleared to join the Big Ten. Now, those were curious terms. Jake and I kind of texted each other like, what does that mean? Well, it sent us out on a fact-finding mission. We reached out to our sources, and Brett McMurphy, as it turns out, as usual, was absolutely right that the Big Ten is now in position to add Oregon and Washington, and that is because we have breaking news, according to our sources in the TV industry, that NBC and CBS have agreed to pay for Oregon and Washington to join the conference, and that CBS and NBC will pay the majority of the freight for those two, and that Fox will pay a small amount for those two. And this is based on the TV contract in the Big Ten, which says that the Pacific time zone, essentially the late windows, really belong to CBS and NBC, who, as we know now, has the Big Ten After Dark package, which will include USC and UCLA 1 year from now. But that deal kicks off this July. But again, the real meat of this story is the Big Ten has the money now to pay to add Oregon and Washington because their TV partners, who they are in lockstep with, who they have spoken to according to our sources, have agreed to add money to the pot to pay for Oregon and Washington, which would give the Big Ten 4 members in the Pacific time zone, 4 members on the West Coast. That is exactly what they need. USC and UCLA need travel partners. CBS and NBC clearly need football content on the West Coast to fill those later windows. I think this makes a lot of sense, and I look at where Fox comes down in all of this, and much like the Big 12, Fox is agreeing to pay a smaller piece because they're looking primarily at Big Ten Saturday on Fox, which will be the early kickoff windows, which would be 10 o'clock Pacific time, in some cases 9 o'clock Pacific time in the morning. That's not going to work. Fox is never going to air Pacific time zone kickoffs on their network, which is why CBS and NBC, who again own those later kickoffs, have agreed to pay the majority of the freight for Oregon and Washington. Now, we were also told that the Big Ten is a little hesitant here. Number one, Oregon and Washington have indicated that if things in the Pac-12 do not work out, and I think this is a significant point, because I would also direct you to the history of our reporting on this show. President Kase at Washington has been very adamant that she is going to direct her university and their decision makers to stay in the Pac-12 conference until the very last breath is available to them. And I also have been told by sources in TV that the Big Ten doesn't want to be seen as, quote unquote, raiding the Pac-12. In other words, they're in no hurry. But the Big Ten very clearly has put their ducks in a row. And if it becomes available to them, and Oregon and Washington would like to leave the Pac-12, which, again, they have not said they would like to at this juncture, but if it becomes available to them, the Big Ten is ready to rock and roll. And Jake, I think, again, this is good management and a good handoff from Kevin Warren to the new commissioner of the Big Ten. This feels like a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, and I think if you're Tony Petitti, the new commissioner of the Big Ten, you're off to a great start here. And I think that this whole setup just screams, hey, we have a good relationship with our TV partners. I mean, that's what it says to me. And I compare this sort of conversation, the Big Ten and their TV partners and, trying to get schools in the Pacific time zone to join their conference. I compare that sort of model and setup to what, for months now that we've heard coming out of the Pac-12 about, George Kliavkoff wanting $400 million and really struggling to figure out, how can we put a deal together that kind of benefits everybody? Because ultimately, I really do believe that's the goal, whether it is Tony Petitti in the Big Ten or Brett Yormark in the Big 12. Like, these guys are just trying to put deals together that benefit their conference, but ultimately in the bigger picture benefit everybody, because a TV partner is not going to do a deal that doesn't benefit them, obviously. So you kind of have to sort of go around the table and say, okay, hey, this benefits you, this benefits me, this benefits the school, we're good to go. Like, it all works. And I see these conversations happening, and I really feel like it reaffirms the point that George Kliavkoff doesn't have either the ability to form good relationships and obviously doesn't have, just generally speaking, good relationships with TV partners or stream partners. And I think that's what's made it so difficult. I think that's one of the bigger reasons why they don't have a deal yet, is because George, we've heard before, right? Like, we've heard that, hey, George is not exactly the easiest to communicate with. He's not exactly, the smoothest, negotiator, if you will. Some of his requests are a little outlandish. When TV partners think you're worth $150 million, let's say, and you're out here asking for $400 million, you can kind of see why a deal wouldn't get done. But then you go to the Big 12 or you go to the Big 10, and it's like, okay, cool. So we have good valuation here. It makes sense why we'd want to add these two schools. They're valuable for, a Fox or a CBS or an NBC or an ESPN or an Apple TV, like whoever that partner is. And it all just kind of works. And I honestly feel like this isn't really, obviously this is like, breaking news, if you will, but is this really that surprising of a development when you think about the course that the Pac-12 is on? Because we've been talking about this concept of, hey, Oregon, Washington, Stanford, and Cal to the Big Ten, right? That those four schools as sort of a pod makes sense in the Big Ten. And then, of course, you've got the Arizona schools, again, Utah, Colorado, like you have this other little pod that makes sense for the Big 12. So that's why I say this wasn't that surprising to me. But I do think it's interesting that the Big 10 doesn't want to be seen as some sort of a Pac-12 raider or some sort of a destroyer, if you will. That I think is fascinating.
Well, I think we've heard that repeatedly. Certainly we've heard that about Brett Yormark and his sentiments, to be respectful and not cross lines. As far as legalities, as far as the way you do business in college sports. And I think we're seeing that across the board because the Pac-12 is a viable conference that simply is trying to work through a process. Now, does that process ultimately lead them to prosperity? I don't know. My opinion is probably not. But does that mean that this conference is going to collapse? No, it doesn't. But I also think this is the same thing we heard about ESPN when sources told us that ESPN is not working for the survival of the Pac-10, that they are more ready to just act upon what happens, which is why they put a pro rata into their contract, because I think ESPN was well aware that the Pac-10, Pac-12 was going to struggle to get a TV deal to keep them together. I think that's why specifically they had no problem doing that pro rata, which means, by the way, hey, if you add other P5 members, I don't know, like Pac-12 schools will pay you on par for those schools. So I think that's a really important development. But you look at this situation with the Big Ten, and again, this was a home run by Brett McMurphy. And Brett's a pro. Brett's been around a long time. And for him to unearth this information, and if you did not hear, Action Network's Brett McMurphy told 365 Sports that the Big Ten has vetted and cleared Oregon and Washington, which was odd language. And frankly, if it had struck me as odd, I probably wouldn't have made a phone call, honestly, because I was trying to figure out, well, what does vetted and cleared mean? Mm-hmm. And what I was told was, hey, do you want to join the conference? Are we talking about all sports? Are we, just going through the process, talking about philosophy? Because I think a lot of the things that we hear about in these conversations are, hey, philosophically, are we business partners? Do we fit together? Are you at Oregon? Are you all about Nike, or is there a relationship across the conference? Like, how can we help each other make more money? Like, there's synergy, philosophies. Obviously, the sports part has to be a fit, and I don't think anybody doubts that Oregon and Washington are athletic fits in the Big Ten. There's no question about that.
Right.
But what I think you have to look at is what will the timing of this be? And I still maintain, and I've heard repeatedly from sources, that people would be shocked if this got through June. And I still maintain, and I know we've said this for months, but I feel like the earliest part of June, I mean, like the first week of June is a drop dead date for a lot of people because you go into this dark period over the summer where there's a lot of executives that are on vacation. There's a lot of presidents who are not working in June and July because they have such long, arduous schedules starting in late July all the way through the spring semester. They take long blocks of time off. Now, does that mean that they're not available for Zoom calls or phone calls? Certainly not. But you don't want to you don't want to drag this through into the football season.
With all due respect.
And truly what I think that means is you don't want to drag this through June because you're going to go through graduation in May at most universities and then pretty much everybody disperses. You have a very quiet period of time in June where, yeah, sure, maybe business can be done. But if a President Cossey or Taylor Randall or, President Robbins in Arizona, if they're gone for a month and they're on a cruise or if they're on an island, or it doesn't make it easy to get these things done, right? So I think most of these administrators want this done by June 1st. I've heard that repeatedly. But this story by Brett McMurphy really put us on to a great conversation we had this morning. And, I frankly believe that NBC and CBS have the most to gain by the collapse of the Pac-12, excuse me. I think number 2 is the Big 12. But NBC and CBS now become prime time players across an entire broadcast window where you're going to be able to captivate audiences from coast to coast. And ESPN may well have the SEC, Jake, but I really feel like when you look at what the Big Ten could be in 2024 with USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington amongst their already strong contingent of basketball and football powerhouses, like there are some must-watch matchups that become, just like clear as day, the Oregon-Ohio States, the USC Michigans, the USC versus anybody, frankly.
Yes.
But what this also does is makes Oregon and USC a really important game on a national level for NBC Sports in Pac-12 After Dark. Oh, wait, excuse me. Big Ten After Dark on NBC.
Better send those refunds.
And on Peacock, who is also a significant part of this distribution deal. Jake, I think this is a home run for CBS and NBC.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's why you're getting reporting on it. I think that it just makes sense. And again, I'm a big proponent, especially in college sports. Things have to sort of fit together. And you can't have just these wild sort of all over the place deals. Things have to align because you have two parties in the conversation. I mean, this whole concept and conversation would be different if we were just talking about, hey, how does Phil Knight in Oregon want to, push their, football content out? Do they want to use YouTube? Do they want to use Twitter? Like, what do they want to use? Well, that's not the conversation we're having. We're having a conversation about, hey, Oregon and Washington now are cleared and vetted by the Big Ten and are have said, hey, yeah, we'd be open to that. It's just a different conversation. So again, every time one of these things happen, like when Brett Yormark went out and put together the Rucker Park thing, or the combine at Jerry World, or any of these events he's put together, I just keep thinking, dude, why do we never hear anything out of the Pac-12? Why do we never hear, George Kliavkoff saying, hey, by the way, we put together this event, we're doing this, we're doing X, Y, and Z. I mean, literally, when's the last time we heard anything out of any, even a statement out of George Kliavkoff's office? He doesn't even need to speak to the media himself, but I'm just surprised that we're getting the Big 12, the Big 10, hell, what happens if the SEC does something tomorrow? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's just this wave of progression and forward
waves and
momentum.
opposition, right?
Yeah,
I think the hard part for a lot of people to understand about the Pac-12 is there's no momentum.
Waves and opposition.
You look at this, And you look at what's being reported now, that the Big Ten has gone to its core television partners and said, hey, we have this opportunity. And there is some belief, I don't know how much credence I put into it. There is some belief that Kevin Warren had this deal done. And then you have a new commissioner that comes in and he puts the ink to paper. I don't know the exact X's and O's of how that was done.
The ink isn't dry yet.
I don't know what that looks like, but what I know is you have a conference in the Big 12 that's in lockstep with its membership and its TV partners. You have a conference in the Big 10 that is in lockstep with its TV partners and its members. You have a conference in the Pac-12 that is not got TV partners and is not in lockstep with its members. And all you hear about is, like Brock Heward talking about being at these Pac-12 and Big 12 meetings in Scottsdale this past week, and you hear about a lack of momentum, a lack of cohesion, a straight up lack of enthusiasm and energy around the Pac-12.
Yeah.
And then you walk across the hall and you walk into the Big 12 meetings and it's like a disco, like everybody's partying and it's energetic and there's momentum and there's excitement. And you look at the face of college football right now, and the thing that concerns you is the Pac-12 does not have traction of any kind. And as we've been reporting all this week and for multiple weeks now, that they're not gaining TV partners, they are losing TV partners.
Yes,
and sources told us, we broke the story first, that Amazon is out altogether on Pac-12 content. They are not currently bidding or interested in bidding on Pac-12 content.
Yeah.
We heard this story last week that, I think Dennis Dodd was wildly misquoted about ESPN, because we were able to get multiple sources to tell us ESPN is in fact still talking to the Pac-12. And the matter is, hey, here's $90 million. You want to give us a tier 1 game and another game? Okay, here's $90 million. Okay, here's $90 million. You want to give us, your 2 worst games and 1 game for stream? Okay, it's probably not going to be $90 million, but we'd love the content. Here's, $70 million. The problem is ESPN has put a cap on their offering to the Pac-12. Our sources have told us, hey, that's $90 million. That's it. That's the top of the table for ESPN. If that is in fact the case, and we've heard that number, and if you've watched this show for any amount of time, I think you know this, we've been reporting $90 million for 6 months.
Yeah.
ESPN has not really moved much off that mark, right? And it goes back to last August when we told you, hey, Fox made it clear from the jump. If you go back on this channel to last August, you will see we had it exclusively. Fox is no longer bidding on Pac-12 Tier 1 content. We told you that in August. We told you ESPN hadn't spoken to the Pac-12 for well over 6 weeks at one stretch earlier this year because they don't have momentum. And the question becomes, if you lose Oregon and Washington here in the next month, because I think Zesty gave us a $2 tip to ask this question. Zesty says, how fast do you think teams move to go to the Big Ten? I don't think fast at all. Because, again, I'll say the same thing about Oregon and Washington. I'll say the same thing about Utah that we've heard repeatedly.
So get your facts straight.
Nobody is excited to leave this conference. Nobody in the Pac-12, these 10 remaining teams, there's not one that's like, all right, can't wait, let's go. Nobody's excited to leave this conference. This is a group of 10 academics who love being in business together. But it's not financially viable from an athletic portion. And I don't know how else to say that athletics is really expensive.
Yeah.
If you look at the hole that Cal and UCLA are currently in, and sure, they're married up a little bit, but why are they in financial difficulties at Cal and UCLA? UCLA was for the longest time in an absolute black hole with Under Armour. They had a terrible uniform deal and apparel deal with Under Armour. They were able to get out of that. It was a huge fight, though. And then you look up at Cal, their brother to the north, and you have this massive Memorial Stadium renovation, and nobody goes to football games because they don't win.
Yeah.
They don't win.
Yeah.
right? And
Pretty much that simple.
now UCLA wants out of the Pac-12 and they want to go to the Big Ten to get financially viable. And all of a sudden now, according to some reports, and we don't know the exact numbers, UCLA is going to have to kick down to Cal to keep them and help them because they left the conference. Like it's expensive. When you're a bad athletic program, it's expensive to be an athletic program. But when you're Utah, when you're Oregon, when you're BYU, when you are, think about the best programs in the country.
Yeah.
It's not expensive. It's a revenue stream. And I look at Oregon and Washington, I think this is an incredibly pragmatic move because you are not disrespecting anybody. You are not the black sheep that now USC is, because USC is where all of this started.
You didn't go behind someone's back.
Well, and I think that's a really important part, because I think when you look at like this part of our reporting here is that the Big Ten, the word that was given to us was the Big Ten doesn't want to be seen to be raiding the Pac-12 or, chopping down the tree, if you will.
Shit. Let's go.
Right? They don't want to be in that position, because anymore in college athletics, everybody's looking to take somebody from you.
Yes.
Right? If you're the Big 12, 6 months ago, there was a real conversation about, well, who could the Pac-12 steal from the Big 12?
Yeah.
That conversation was happening, right? So you're never that far away from that. And you look at the Big Ten's deal, and I think a lot of people look at the fact that Big Ten schools are going to realize between $80 and $100 million.
Right.
But I think when you look at the net impact, let's say that the Pac-12 disintegrates.
Mm-hmm.
Well, everybody, wants to throw wood on the bonfire and dance around and celebrate. But if you guys stop for a second to think about, what is the net impact of the Pac-12 disintegrating or shrinking? That's got an impact on everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Because if teams go to the Big 12 and teams go to the Big 10, and you've got 4 to 6, potentially 4 really is what it's looking like. If UW and Oregon wind up in the Big 10, it's 4 schools that are going to be remaining. And I'm telling you, it is Stanford, Cal, and I think they are incredibly, somebody said to me today that Stanford and Cal are incredibly attractive proproperties across the country.
Yeah, well, again, it's this educational conversation, isn't it? Like,
it is.
Again, they make so much money educationally that if you're, again, you're looking at them, you're like, yeah, sure, you suck in athletics, but educationally, you're making that bread, and we want that, on our payroll.
Yeah.
We want that on our P&L sheet, and I think that's why they're so attractive. Again, this isn't just a conversation about athletics, and I think you have to remember that.
Yeah, I don't know how you reconcile this. I don't, but I think Zesty asked a really good question. Like when we're talking about, how fast do you think teams move if they go to the Big Ten? I don't think it's tomorrow. If you look at teams moving to the Big Ten, I think you're not going to get that announcement until later in June.
Yeah, No, I just don't think that there's going to be some exodus. And especially I don't think there's going to be an exodus to the Big Ten. I think that
I don't either.
I think that Oregon and Washington, if they decide to go to the Big Ten, definitely encourages teams to leave and definitely sends a very clear message, obviously through action. But that doesn't mean that this cute little 4 corner school label that everyone runs out there is going to happen. It could happen, I guess, but who's to really say? I know for a fact that Utah doesn't want to leave the Pac-12. I know for a fact that these different schools don't want to leave. Now, will they leave if they must? Yes, of course. But they don't want to leave.
Listen, if Oregon and Washington leave this conference, you're leaving schools in a very bad position, because you just don't have a viable entity without big brands.
Yeah.
And it's why the Conference USAs and the small conferences are struggling to keep membership. You look at the interview we did with Gloria Navarez, the commissioner of the Mountain West, talking about it's a matter of when, not if, San Diego State leaves.
Right.
We've exclusively reported on this show as well that Gonzaga has an oral invitation, a verbal invitation to the Big 12.
Gonzaga.
It's a matter of when, not if.
Gonzaga.
So knowing that, I think you have to be pragmatic. If you are Like Oregon State's another one of these interesting schools. You know, like Utah. I think Utah, so many people want to get after Utah. I'm telling you, the people that run Utah are incredibly intelligent, really good administrators. They're not going to sit around and watch their house burn down and, you know, say everything's great. But right now, today, are you expecting anybody up at Utah to say, oh, the world's terrible, we're looking for a new place? They're not going to say that because, frankly, the world at Utah is not terrible. They're dominating in football. Their women's sports are off the charts right now, from gymnastics to women's basketball. The women's softball team is in the semifinal of the Pac-12 tournament. Like, they're definitely going on to the super regionals. Like, you look at the success that the Utah athletic program is having, they are by no means standing in a house that's on fire.
Yeah.
But I also don't think they're just going to stand there and do nothing. The people at Utah are too intelligent. If there becomes a need, they will act accordingly. There is no question about that.
Yes.
But it's schools like Oregon State who don't have that luxury. Oregon State, I think, has to act aggressively. And I do believe that Oregon State has significant value to Brett Yormark and the Big 12, because, again, when we sit here and talk about this, okay, so let's sketch the map out, right? Oregon and Washington go to the Big 10. Okay, so your only opportunity at that point to add for the Big 12, to add the Pacific time zone, is Oregon State, because Washington and Oregon are gone. I don't believe that Stanford and Cal are options for the Big 12. I think Oregon State's your huckleberry.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at the Arizona schools, and I truly believe Colorado, I've just talked to too many people, and I know that Colorado's chancellor came out and said, you know, whatever he said about, listen, I think Colorado will leave at their first opportunity. I think the University of Arizona will leave the Pac-12 at their first opportunity.
Yeah.
I think Utah's going to wait a long time. I think Washington and Oregon are going to wait a long time because, frankly, there's no impetus for them to go sooner.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, it's not like you're getting paid more. Like, it's not like if they're not being told, hey, if you leave tomorrow, you're getting some huge paycheck.
Yeah, or if you don't come today, you can never come at all.
Yeah.
Oregon and Washington can write their own calendar.
Yeah.
As far as going to another conference. But it's schools like Oregon State, schools like Utah.
Yeah.
You know, what do you say to San Diego State today? If you are San Diego State, and again, I think J.D. Wicker, dude, with all due respect to J.D. Wicker, I think he made a complete ass of himself. We've talked about this. With all due respect. Dude, we've talked about this on the show. I think J.D. Wicker has made a complete fool of himself, and I think he has embarrassed himself and the San Diego State athletic program with that little blurb in the Athletic about, hey, we're going somewhere, we just don't know where.
That's right, T.
Why would you say that? You make yourself look desperate.
Thirsty.
And by the way, the other thing that I think is so important here is, how viable is San Diego State in the Big 12? And what is, if you could add San Diego State or Oregon State, which one are you picking?
Oregon State.
I'm taking Oregon State.
All day.
That's a P5 that I can get paid on right now.
And they just got new facilities.
Right? But again, financially, tell me that Oregon State doesn't make more sense than San Diego State.
It does.
Because I can get San Diego State. If I'm Brett Yormark, I can get San Diego State anytime I want.
Yeah.
But if you're San Diego State, can you really today, if George Kliavkoff called you today, you're San Diego State, hey, we'd love you guys to join the conference today. Is the best move for San Diego State to join the Pac-12? I'm going to tell you it's not, because you're not going to get paid a full share if you get a share, because who knows what their new TV deal is going to look like. If Brett Yormark called you and said, hey, we'll happily add you guys for $17 million. Tell me that you how do you turn that down?
I don't know.
If you are San Diego State, how do you turn that down?
By the way, if you're San Diego State, are you not looking at this news saying, okay, well, maybe the Big 12 is a little more attractive. Maybe we shouldn't have said thanks, but no thanks.
I mean, that's for real, dude. That is for real. Hey, for real, big shout out to Marlon Shaw, who gifted us 10 memberships today.
Let's go, baby.
Let's Let's go. Go get those
here.
memberships on Free Membership Friday. We always love when you guys give out memberships, and Marlon has supported this show for so long. We appreciate that, Marlon. Thank you, as always. Always good to see you. Let's get your comments in here, guys. Like, where are you at on this? And if you're just tuning in, because I see a lot of people are joining the show now, Brett Murphy at the Action Network told 365 Sports that the Big Ten has, quote, vetted and cleared Oregon and Washington. And for us, we didn't really understand what that meant.
Right.
Like, okay, I know what the word vetted means, and I know what the word cleared means, but what does that really mean? So we got on the phone, we contacted a bunch of our sources who gave us information, put us in touch with some other people who were able to confirm that Brett McMurphy's a stud, as we already know, and that Brett McMurphy's exactly right. Our sources also gave us additional information that CBS and NBC, as well as Fox, have agreed to pay the freight to add Oregon and Washington, but this primarily impacts NBC and CBS because they own the later windows. Fox has the Big Ten Saturday package, which is the early kickoff. The first kickoffs in the country are on Fox for the Big Ten. And that late window, this move with Oregon and Washington, I think really impacts NBC the most. But certainly this would play a role for CBS as well in that 3:30 Eastern window, I believe it is. Forgive me, I should have reread the contract for the Big Ten and their TV networks, but I'm pretty certain that CBS owns the 3:30 Eastern kickoff window, and that NBC and Peacock, the streaming app for NBC Peacock, have the late windows. This just gives Peacock and NBC more selection. It also gives, I think, a better slate of matchups for the Big Ten, because certainly the Big Ten, as we have documented on this show at length, is not a deep football conference. Mm-hmm. As much money as they are getting, as wonderful as that deal is for their membership, this conference, the Big Ten, lacks in quality depth.
Y'all feel me?
And so when you're talking about the Purdues, the Minnesotas of the world, the Illinois footballs of the world, as a football conference, there is a real lack of depth. Because right now, if you look at 2024, because don't forget the Big Ten TV deal starts this year. In 2024, when USC and UCLA join, which presumably, if they wind up executing, Washington and Oregon would join in 2024 as well.
Yeah.
Now you have matchups in that late window that are appealing across the country.
Right.
I think that's the win for NBC and CBS. And I think, of course, Fox is going to win because Fox is, much like in the Big 12, more interested in the basketball side of things. I think they recognize the value there. I think they also recognize that adding Oregon and Washington to the USC and UCLA Big Ten basketball puzzle really strengthens the Big Ten as a basketball conference. So where are you guys at on this? What do you guys think of this? Scott of Graywater says Utah to the Mountain West.
Sorry if you're offended by that.
I don't get this. I don't understand people who don't understand the value of Utah. Mm-hmm. And I try to get an answer on this every day on this show.
The list is long of people who don't understand Utah's value.
What is it that would make you make a comment like this, Utah to the Mountain West? That's what I don't understand. I don't. Mark Hales, will the Washington state government let UW leave Wazoo behind? They tried to marry the two, and they were not successful at the legislative level. I do believe that they will. I do believe that they will allow Washington to leave Washington State behind, because I think, speaking of the Mountain West, I think Washington State is a perfect fit in the Mountain West. Yes, perfect fit, because I don't think the Mountain West is going anywhere. Frankly,
yeah,
I don't believe they're going anywhere.
They're in a good place.
I think when you look at, if you're Gloria Nevarez, who was on this show, check the archives here on YouTube. Gloria Nevarez, the commissioner of the Mountain West, told us they have a list of targets in place ready to go. And I think when you look at Washington State, with all due respect, whether it's the Rolovich scandal or any of the issues they've had, they've never been able to really consistently compete at the top of the Pac-12.
Nope.
They've never been able to win consistently, no matter what the sport is. And I think, frankly, I think it's been a problem for them. So we'll see. You know, I don't know. I don't pretend to know exactly, but Washington State is they're a very interesting ecosystem at Washington State. The Palouse in general, you're so close to Spokane, like that whole section of this country.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, if you're Washington State, do you have more value than Gonzaga does?
Not nationally, certainly.
If you're the Big 12, who brings more value to you, Washington State or Gonzaga?
Well, I think if you can find a way to add Oregon State, I think Gonzaga adds more value.
You do?
Yeah. I mean, I think Gonzaga brings you national relevancy in basketball. I think and I think this is the Pac-12's problem overall. The Pac-12 is an awful basketball conference. Like,
yes,
they
it
just
is.
are. It's garbage.
Yes, it is.
And I think the conversation would be a lot different if Washington State had some prolific basketball program, but it doesn't. Utah doesn't have a basketball program that's prolific. These different schools, even SC. Like, I know they just got Bronny, but up until this point, SC really hasn't done anything. I mean, it just isn't. It's just not anything of consequence. And I think that is why Oregon and Washington would be a great fit in the Big Ten, because again, the Big Ten, is an okay basketball conference. They're not a great football conference, obviously. So I think, this fall off that you have because the Big 12 is such a good basketball conference is kind of intimidating. And that's why I say, like, Gonzaga is a better fit, even though they're basketball only.
I agree. I think I would tell you, I don't even think it's a discussion. I think Gonzaga is a far better fit in the Big 12 than Washington State. And that's not a slight on Washington State. I just think where Pullman is in the money that Gonzaga has generated for the WCC.
Gonzaga.
I just, and again, you joke, but Brett Yormark has talked about the fact that he really respects Gonzaga.
I like Gonzaga.
But right now, it's just not the moment in time.
Gonzaga.
And he's offered them membership. Our sources have told us that Brett Yormark has told Gonzaga, when you guys are ready, let us know. We have a home for you. And I think, again, you look at, and I think it was Laura Weiss who commented on this. I think this is an excellent point. An excellent point. Nobody wants to be the killer of the Pac-12. And I totally understand. The optics are not good. I totally understand that, right? I do.
Speaking of Washington State, how funny is this?
But, well, didn't the Big Ten accept USC and UCLA? And what really put the Pac-12 on the precipice of extinction? Well, it was USC lying, in my opinion, to the rest of the Pac-12 and saying, nah, because remember the story. USC and their president were on a conference call with the rest of the Pac-12 executive committee.
Yeah.
And the topic was, should we expand?
Which, in and of itself, I must say, is a dumb question.
Well, sure. But you have to talk about it with your executive committee.
Of course, yeah.
USC was the one who abstained and said, no, we should not expand. We like the way it is. According to our sources, that's how the conversation went. USC was on this conference call and, hey, you know what? Let's expand, and here's some candidates. Like, they were having the conversation. They were going through the proper channels, taking the steps. And Carol Foltz said, the president at USC said, nah, I think we're good where we are.
Is this the dagger?
And she's literally like, yeah, I think we're good where we are. Hey, does this pen work? Yeah, we're good. All right, I got to go, guys. Click. All right, let me sign this agreement with the Big Ten. All right, cool. All right.
The ink isn't dry yet.
Like, that's legit how it was described to us as, hey, Carol Folt, the president at USC, killed expansion in the Pac-12. And weeks later, dropped a bombshell on the Pac-12 offices and said, hey, peace out, MFers, we're gone. And, oh, by the way, UCLA is going with us.
Damn.
And completely blindsided the rest of the Pac-12.
What constitutes a promise?
How they kept it silent, I have no idea. But they did. And you know what? I think the mental focus that it took to keep it silent like that can only be explained that Carol Folt drinks bucked up energy. I mean, that's the only thing
I don't even know what else he can
that's
say,
the
dude.
only rationale that I can think of.
Yeah.
Hey, look what I got here. The holy grail of energy drinks It is Bucked Up Miami.
I'm for real.
It is zero sugar. It is
for
quality
real.
ingredients. It is long-lasting, clean energy from our good friends at Bucked Up. And you guys, I tell you every day, a lot of people have noticed that my energy has been much higher of late. And, well, you know why? Because I have absolutely been using buckshots from Bucked Up Energy.
This stuff is legit, dude. And I've not been a big, this type of product, right? A little guy that you just kind of like a shot. Like, I haven't been a big fan of this type of product, but this from Bucked Up, absolutely phenomenal.
It's in the description below for free.
Yeah.
I said it's in the description below for free.
Go do it.
Let's go. They'll send it right to your front door for free. You get 6 free samples of Buckshot. I'm telling you, go with the watermelon because, again, I think it's fantastic. It's 100 milligrams of caffeine, but it's also got things like B12 in it. It's got clean ingredients for clean, long-lasting, all-day energy. You take one small Buckshot, and you're going to immediately feel a mental raise. You're going to feel clarity. You're going to think clearer. You're going to feel better. You're going to be able to finish out that day. And listen, if it's 1 o'clock and you had your lunch and you're dragging ass, pop a Buckshot and kick ass for the rest of the day. That's what it's all about. And they want you to try it for free. You know, we never ask you to pay or spend money without giving you guys free samples. Hook it up at Bucked Up. In the description below, click the link, get free 6 Buckshots sent right to your front door.
That's the bottom line.
That is the bottom line, damn it. But if you guys need BCAs, if you guys want I'm telling you, their collagen peptides are fantastic. Mrs. Monty and I put them in our morning shakes. Their greens are fantastic. They have high stim, they have low stim. And hey, man, Walmart.com, any of the Bucked Up stores in Utah, get Miami, the energy drink. It is awesome. Josh Chandler, 810 says the Big doesn't want Oregon. Well, I can tell you point blank, we were told the exact opposite of that.
Just simply untrue.
By a very high-ranking television official today, that absolutely the Big Ten wants Oregon and Washington. And they know, and frankly, it makes perfect sense. They know they need a Western front.
Yeah.
Because you can't just have USC and UCLA in Los Angeles. You can't ask them to travel that much repeatedly. And I don't even mean football and basketball. I mean track. I mean baseball and softball.
That's what everyone forgets. Like, it's not just football, man. There's an army of athletes that have to move.
And it's expensive.
Yeah.
So I would totally disagree with you. Jansen, what's up, my guy? Eye patch. BYU won the Natty in '84 less than a century ago. Okay, they did. Washington holding out for a media deal that cannot exist to push other Pac teams out the door is messed up. I truly think the reason that teams or universities like Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, Washington, Oregon, the reason that they're not going is because they know they can go whenever they want. And they don't want to go.
Yeah.
They don't want to leave the Pac-12. It's too good. The money is too good. The relationships are too good. And a lot of those relationships go away when you are not in the same athletic affiliation. And we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, which is this argument with Utah. I mean, I don't know. I think it's $700 million or something. Do you understand that the University of Utah in Salt Lake City has one of the preeminent medical programs, like with UHealth, which is their medical system, the Huntsman Cancer Center, like Utah, the money that they make through research and medicine is astronomical.
Yeah.
So when you can partner with somebody like Arizona, who has an incredible footprint of like in Arizona, like Mayo Clinic, and you have Arizona State that's got all, like, you guys, like, these relationships are worth hundreds of millions of dollars a year.
Yeah.
Hundreds of millions of dollars. That's what we're talking about. And that's why I don't understand where people are like, oh, Utah's arrogant. You know, they think they're Ivy League. No, nobody at Utah thinks they're Ivy League. And trust me when I tell you this. The people at the University of Utah, they're well aware of who they are. They're well aware of where they are, and they're just fine being the University of Utah. They are confident. They are not arrogant. They are intelligent. They are not fools. They know exactly who they are.
Yeah.
And I think they should be confident.
Yeah.
Cougar Tracks, how the heck are you? Who's going to pay $50 million the Pac still owes. Every one of these 12 members is on the hook for it, and that includes USC and UCLA.
Yeah.
So you're
Again,
talking about,
that's why you'd be incentivized to make more money, right?
You would be. But if you look at that money, I mean, it's a hell of a lot easier to swallow $50 million when you're dividing it 12 ways, which is $4.2 million. I mean, that's a hell of a lot easier to swallow than $5 million each. Or let's make a new TV deal and it's $4.2 million per school. They owe the money. It's in the contract. It's in their arrangements. Like, they owe the money. They're going to pay it. So there's no way, in my opinion, that they don't pay it. Tumasta, member of the program, says Pac-12 on the brink of collapse. Sources say maybe possibly not perhaps. I don't believe that they are on the verge of collapse. I don't think today that they're on the verge of collapse. I truly don't. I know that a lot of people want them to be. They're not. They're not on the verge of collapse. And again, I know that people want that.
I just think that
I don't understand that.
because I think it's easy to go to that when we're sitting here talking about Oregon and Washington going to the Big Ten on top of USC and UCLA. I mean, that is a gutting of the Pac-12, dude. I don't care what anyone says. If those two go in addition to USC and UCLA, your conference is done. It's over.
Yeah.
Like you're no longer a Power Five. You're not like with all due respect to Utah and Washington State and Oregon State and Colorado. Like, you're done, dude. Like, those four schools are the lifeblood of the conference. So, yeah, you can stomach and absorb losing SC and UCLA, sure, as long as everyone else stays. But now, I don't know. I guess I just believe in the concept that if USC and UCLA leave, that kind of shocked everyone, and everyone had to come together and decide, all right, like, are we going to move forward or what are we going to do? Okay, we're going to try and put a deal together. So they're trying to put a deal together. But now, if Oregon and Washington are presumed to be leaving, if that happens, it just encourages everyone to look at their options. So Colorado, Oregon State, Utah, like anyone who's got any kind of value proposition is looking at options.
Yeah. Big bad brass balls. Bulls. Love that. Gives us $2 to say they turned down $100 million because they hurt schools. What do you mean by that? Help me understand it. Marlon Shaw says, how does the Pac get a grant of rights from Oregon and Washington? They don't.
They don't.
And I think that's the biggest problem here. And we've talked about this at length.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer that grant of rights are going away. I think the next iteration of TV deals, I think, will be very different. Because I think $100 million deals are done. You're not getting billion-dollar TV deals. $100 million per school per season.
Yeah.
Those are done. I think the TV industry is changing. I think you look at the numbers that we talked about with ESPN Plus yesterday, where what is it, $430 million per quarter for ESPN Plus. And Disney alone is making $5 billion a quarter on streaming. On streaming.
Not a year. A quarter.
A quarter. So I think the TV deals are changing. I think they're absolutely changing. Kurt Myers, Bob, do you have Big Ten on your car? Bob, I don't know who Bob is. Let's see. Let's keep rolling. Raider Mark, it does seem that behind the scenes everyone is putting plans into place, plan A, B, and C. Oh, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
There is no doubt about that.
Yeah, you got to have multiple plans.
Jake Nelson, Utah has value, but they already said they wouldn't go to the Big 12. No, that's not
what they said, dude.
We were told by sources essentially sitting on top of the totem pole at Utah that they have had productive and real conversations with the Big 12, that they respect the Big 12, but we were told directly that Utah said not right now because Utah does not want to leave the Pac-12. And I think the biggest issue is they worry about the loss of educational revenue. And they worry about partnerships and relationships, as they should. And I also think that when you look at Utah, they said not right now. Utah, from what our sources have told us, Utah's never said we're never going to the Big 12. No. That's never happened. They have never said the Big 12 sucks. We're not. They've never done that.
Yeah,
they have never done that. So Hola Billy, my guy. Hullabilly, where you
Where
been?
you been, bro?
Utah will be fine, baby. I believe they will. To Masta, Utah can move to California. Well, I did see moving vans heading up to Utah. So
I mean, they're going to pick up the whole, they're going to pick up Rice Eccles and drive it out to Stillwater.
With a forklift, right?
Yeah.
I think so.
That's what's going to happen, Tonto.
Yeah. Renee Roca, I'd be fine with Utah to the Mountain West. Value, please elaborate. Okay, so again, explain to me why.
You're misinterpreting what I'm saying.
If you are Utah, why would you go to the Mountain West?
Yeah.
Explain to me. And again, I asked this. Find me the P5 program that has been like, yeah, fuck it, we're out. We're going to a G5. This P5 stuff, we don't need that.
Come on.
Tell me where that is.
You have to be nice to stupid people.
B, we've talked about the value of Utah repeatedly. So beyond the fact that they're dominant in football, beyond the fact that they have arguably the best or one of the best coaches in the country, some of the best facilities, some of the best education, some of the best non-football, basketball sports in the country, beyond the fact that their research, their revenue streams, their institutions, their different schools, like beyond all of that, like you combine, like, what do you mean? What is their value? Like, and I think this is a real conversation. I think fans look at this as, well, they haven't ever been to the college football playoff. What's their value?
Not a good question.
That has nothing to do with it. Almost nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
Now, if Alabama was available, well, shit, yeah, it's Nick Saban.
Roll Tide!
It's Nick Saban. It's Alabama. They've won championships. Okay,
The dynasty is not over.
totally get it. But how many of these schools that we're talking about do you really think the Big Ten's like, well, they only won 11 games there, and then they won 6 games here. And did you see their track and field program? And by the way, Oregon's got terrible uniforms. Yeah, we're vetting schools, and I just don't think that they're a fit.
That's out of the window.
Do you really think?
No.
Do you guys? I mean, do you hear the question like, "What's the value of Utah?"
Quiet.
I just think that's with all due respect, Roca, because you're on the show every day, and I love you, dude. But this is a ridiculous question.
Yeah.
It's a ridiculous question. Boyd Lake, for Utah to have max value, they need to play BYU in the Holy War every freaking year.
Agreed.
But if we're talking about athletics let's just talk about athletics in general. Utah Ute fans travel everywhere. Did you see the Rose Bowl? Back-to-back years? Remember that part where they went to the Rose Bowl 2 years in a row? By the way, if you look at the Pac-12 championship games, almost nobody goes to those games. Ute fans went en masse to those games. I mean, you
Just
can complain.
saying.
Do they not win out of conference games? They don't. I agree. They've blown out of conference games, and it sucks. I think that changes this year with Florida, but until it does, it isn't.
Yeah.
Okay, great. There you go. Other than that, they've won back-to-back conference championships. The fans travel. Their fans watch them on TV. Their fans, support their partnerships. They support the Pac-12. There's nothing not to like about Utah.
Yeah.
Nothing. They are essentially secular. Now, Utah's in Salt Lake City, and there's a massive LDS, Latter-day Saints, Mormon presence. Absolutely.
In God's name, image, and likeness.
But it's not BYU, because remember, nobody wanted BYU because they wouldn't play on Sundays and they wear magic underwear. Oh,
God
and
bless.
then the cycle happened, and everybody's like, damn, we should have added BYU.
Man. Wow.
What do you mean
Yeah.
there's no value